The girl was known as the quiet one. She sat near the window in the back of the classroom, always choosing a seat where she would not be noticed. She never raised her hand, even when she knew the answer. When the teacher asked questions, her eyes stayed fixed on her notebook, as if the paper was more interesting than the world around her. Many people believed she was simply afraid or slow, but no one truly tried to understand her. She walked through the school halls like a shadow, light on her feet, careful not to bump into anyone. Her shoulders were often pulled inward, and her head stayed low. When groups of students laughed loudly, she passed them quietly, hoping not to draw attention. If someone spoke to her, she answered softly, sometimes with only a nod. Most people did not remember her voice because they rarely heard it at home. Life was simple and calm. The house was small, but it felt safe. In the corner of the living room stood an old piano. Its wood was worn, and some keys showed signs of age, but it still worked. This piano was her secret world. When she sat in front of it, everything else faded away. The noise of school, the looks from others, and the heavy feeling in her chest all disappeared. She had learned to play on her own. No teacher guided her hands, and no audience clapped for her. She listened carefully to songs on the radio or online, then tried to repeat them. Sometimes she failed and had to start again. Other times, the notes flowed smoothly, as if her fingers already knew where to go. She played late into the night when the house was quiet. Music became the place where she felt strong. In school, no one knew about this part of her life. Music class was rare, and when it happened, she stayed silent like always. When others sang or played small instruments, she watched from her seat. Her face showed no emotion, but inside, she felt something deep. She understood music in a way that words could not explain. Still, she kept it hidden. There was an upcoming school event that everyone talked about. It was meant to show talents, skills, and creativity. Students were encouraged to perform, speak, or display something special. Posters were placed on the walls, and teachers reminded the class daily. Excitement filled the air. Some students already planned dances, jokes, or songs. Others practiced loudly during breaks. She heard about the event, but hoped it would pass without affecting her. She had no intention of joining. Standing on a stage felt like a nightmare. The thought of people watching her made her hands sweat. She told herself she would sit quietly in the audience, just another face in the crowd. But people began to notice her more than usual. A teacher had once seen her sitting near the piano in the music room after class. She had not played a note, but she had touched the keys gently, as if greeting an old friend. That small moment planted a seed. Soon, whispers started. Some students joked that the quiet girl should play something. Others laughed at the idea. She felt the change before anyone said anything directly. Eyes lingered on her longer. A few classmates nudged each other and glanced her way. Her heart began to race whenever the music room door opened. She tried to avoid walking past the piano, but it seemed to appear everywhere. One afternoon, a teacher spoke to her after class. The voice was kind but firm. The teacher asked if she could play the piano. The question felt heavy, like a stone dropped into her chest. She shook her head quickly, eyes wide with fear. Words failed her. She wanted to say no, to run, to disappear. The teacher did not push at that moment, but the idea was now out in the open. Later that day, students talked about it openly. Some said it would be funny to see her try. Others said she probably could not even play one song. Their words were not loud, but they reached her ears anyway. That night, she sat at her piano longer than usual. Her fingers hovered over the keys as her thoughts raced. She played softly, then louder, then stopped. Her chest felt tight. Music had always been her escape, but now it felt connected to fear. Still, when she played, something inside her refused to stay silent. She remembered the first time she touched the piano as a child. Back then, she had been curious, not afraid. The sound of the notes had amazed her. Over the years, music became the one place where she felt seen, even if no one was watching. It was never about applause. It was about expression. The next day at school, the pressure grew stronger. A group of students surrounded her desk, asking if she would perform. Some smiled, others smirked. She felt trapped. Her face burned and her throat tightened. She wanted to say no again, but the words would not come out. The teacher announced that the piano would be part of the event and encouraged her to participate. The room fell quiet for a moment, then filled with soft laughter and whispers. She wished the floor would open and swallow her whole as the day went on. She felt smaller and smaller. Yet deep inside, something stirred. A quiet voice reminded her of the hours spent playing alone. The emotions poured into every note. That voice was scared, but it was also strong. When she returned home, she sat at the piano once more. The keys felt familiar under her fingers. She played not for practice, but for comfort. Each note helped her breathe again. She did not know what would happen next, but one thing was clear. The quiet life she had carefully built was about to change, whether she was ready or not. The days leading up to the school event moved slowly for her. Each morning felt heavier than the last. She woke up with a tight feeling in her chest, already thinking about school, about the piano, about the eyes that seemed to follow her everywhere now. What once felt like a quiet routine had turned into something tense and uncertain. In class, she could no longer disappear into the background. Teachers spoke her way more often, asking gentle but pointed questions. Students glanced at her, some with curiosity, others with amusement. She felt like she was standing under a light that refused to turn off. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, fingers pressed together to stop them from shaking. During breaks, she tried to sit alone like before, but it was harder now. People whispered nearby, not always quietly. She heard words like piano, stage, and talent show. Some voices sounded excited, others doubtful. A few laughed, clearly expecting her to fail. Each laugh felt like a small push toward the edge of something she was not ready for. One afternoon, she was called into the music room after class. The room smelled faintly of dust and old books. The piano stood in the center, its black surface reflecting the light from the window. She froze at the doorway. Just being near it in this place made her heart race. A teacher stood nearby, speaking calmly. The teacher said there was no pressure, that the event was about sharing, not judging. The words sounded kind, but they did not ease her fear. She shook her head again, eyes fixed on the floor. Her voice came out barely louder than a breath when she said she was not ready. The teacher nodded but did not end the conversation. Instead, the teacher suggested she sit at the piano, just to try. No audience, no stage, just the room. She hesitated for a long moment. Then, slowly, she moved forward. The bench felt cold when she sat down. Her hands rested on her knees. The piano keys were right there, so close, yet they felt miles away. She closed her eyes for a second, trying to calm her breathing. Memories of playing at home flashed through her mind. The safety of her living room felt very far away. She placed her fingers on the keys and pressed one. The sound echoed softly in the empty room. It startled her, but it was also familiar. She pressed another key, then another. Soon, a simple melody filled the space. It was not loud or fast, but it was honest. The teacher listened quietly, not interrupting. When she stopped, the silence felt thick. She waited for a comment, her heart pounding. The teacher finally spoke, saying the music was beautiful and asking how long she had been playing. She shrugged, unsure how to answer. Years of practice felt like a secret she did not know how to share. Word spread quickly after that. She did not tell anyone herself, but people talked. By the next day, more students believed she could actually play. That did not make things easier. In some ways, it made them worse. Now expectations replaced doubt, and both felt heavy. Some students began encouraging her loudly, telling her she had to perform. Others challenged her, saying it was easy to play alone but different on stage. She felt pulled in every direction. Saying no seemed impossible. Saying yes felt terrifying. At home, she struggled to sleep. She lay awake listening to the quiet sounds of the house. Her thoughts would not slow down. She imagined walking onto the stage, imagined forgetting everything, imagined the room laughing. Then she imagined playing perfectly, the music filling the space. Both thoughts scared her. She played the piano every night, but now it felt different. Her fingers moved faster, almost urgently. She played songs she loved and songs she made up on the spot. Music spilled out of her like words she had never spoken. Sometimes tears fell onto the keys, blurring her vision. She did not wipe them away. A few days before the event, a group of students cornered her in the hallway. They told her she was already signed up. She tried to protest, but her voice failed her again. The hallway felt too narrow, the walls too close. When they finally left, she leaned against the wall, breathing hard. That evening, she did not touch the piano right away. She sat on the floor, back against the couch, staring at the instrument. Fear and love twisted together inside her. She realized that no one had ever forced her to share this part of herself before. It felt unfair, but it was happening. She stood up slowly and sat at the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. Then she began to play, not for others, not for the event, but for herself. The melody was strong and steady. With every note, she felt a small piece of her fear loosen. The night before the event arrived faster than she expected. Her school bag sat by the door. Her clothes were laid out neatly. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal inside her. She touched the piano one last time before going to bed, pressing a single key. The sound lingered in the air. At school the next morning, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Chairs were being set up, equipment tested. She moved through it all like she was underwater. People smiled at her, waved, pointed. She kept her eyes down, counting her steps. As she waited backstage, the noise from the audience grew louder. Her name was next on the list. Her hands were cold, her mouth dry. She thought about turning around and leaving. No one could stop her. For a moment, she almost did. Then she remembered the quiet nights at home, the worn keys, the way music had always held her together. She took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing. She was about to face the moment she had been avoiding, and there was no turning back. She stood just behind the curtain, listening to the noise of the room. Chairs scraped the floor, people talked over one another, and laughter rose and fell in waves. From where she stood, she could see a small gap in the curtain and the bright lights beyond it. Her heart beat so hard she thought others might hear it. Someone before her finished performing. Applause filled the room, loud and quick. Her hands felt numb. She rubbed them together, trying to bring warmth back into her fingers. The piano waited at the center of the stage. It looked larger than it ever had before. A voice announced that the next performance was about to begin. When her turn was called, the sound of her name echoed in the room. For a second, she did not move. Her legs felt heavy, like they did not belong to her. Then, almost without thinking, she took a step forward. The curtain opened, and the lights hit her face. She squinted slightly, not used to the brightness. Rows of people stretched out before her. She could not see every face clearly, but she felt their attention settle on her all at once. The noise faded into a low hum. She walked slowly toward the piano. Each step felt loud, even though the room was quiet. She heard a few soft laughs from somewhere in the crowd. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. Every small sound made her chest tighten. When she reached the piano bench, she paused. For a brief moment, she considered turning around. No one had tied her there. She could still leave. But then she remembered how many times she had already wanted to disappear. She was tired of running. She sat down. The bench felt firm under her weight. The piano keys shone under the stage lights. She placed her hands in her lap and took a slow breath. The room waited. Her fingers moved to the keys, shaking slightly. She pressed down on one key by mistake, and a sharp sound rang out. A few people shifted in their seats. Her face burned. She closed her eyes for a moment and forced herself to breathe again. Then she began. The first notes were soft and slow. They did not rush. They filled the space gently, like a quiet voice speaking from the heart. The room grew still. Even the small noises faded away. As she continued, her hands began to steady. The fear did not disappear, but it moved aside. Muscle memory took over. Her fingers knew where to go, sliding across the keys with care and purpose. The melody grew deeper, stronger. The music told a story without words. It spoke of loneliness, of long nights and quiet hopes. It carried moments of sadness and moments of light. Each note felt honest, pulled straight from her chest. People leaned forward in their seats. Some stopped breathing without realizing it. The soft laughter from earlier was gone. No one whispered now. She forgot about the lights. She forgot about the audience. In her mind, she was back at home, sitting at her old piano. The worn keys felt familiar. The world outside the music disappeared. Her playing grew more powerful. The gentle melody turned bold, then tender again. Her hands moved faster, then slowed. Every change felt natural, like the music was guiding her rather than the other way around. A few people in the crowd felt something tighten in their throats. Others blinked rapidly, surprised by the emotion rising inside them. They had not expected this. Not from her. The students who once laughed now stared at the stage in silence. Some felt uneasy, realizing how wrong they had been. Others felt small, remembering the jokes and whispers they had shared. Even the teachers watched with wide eyes. They exchanged quiet looks, clearly shocked. This was not a simple performance. This was something deeper. She reached the final part of the piece. The music softened again, slowing as if it did not want to end. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear now, but from emotion. She played the last note and lifted her fingers gently from the keys. The sound lingered in the air. For a moment, no one moved. The room was completely silent. It felt like time had stopped. She kept her hands in her lap, unsure of what to do next. Her heart pounded, waiting for something, anything. Then someone clapped. The sound was sharp and clear. Another clap followed, then another. Suddenly, the room filled with applause. It grew louder and louder, echoing off the walls. She looked up, startled. She had not expected this. Her eyes searched the crowd, still unable to fully believe what was happening. People were standing now, clapping with real energy. Some smiled widely, others wiped their eyes. Her chest felt tight again, but in a different way. Tears filled her eyes. She stood slowly, unsure how to respond. She gave a small bow without thinking, her movements shy and awkward. The applause continued. It did not fade quickly like before. It stayed strong, full of respect. She felt overwhelmed by it. As she left the stage, the lights dimmed behind her. The noise followed her backstage, but it sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. Her legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Someone spoke to her, praising her performance, but the words blurred together. She nodded, still trying to understand what had just happened. Her hands shook as the emotion finally caught up to her. She had done it. She had played. For the first time, the part of herself she had kept hidden was no longer a secret. And as she stood there, tears quietly falling, she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. She remained backstage for a while after the performance, leaning against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. The applause still echoed in her ears, even after it had faded in the room outside. Her heart felt full and heavy at the same time. She had faced the moment she feared most, and now she did not know what came next. People began to approach her slowly, as if unsure how close to come. A teacher offered a gentle smile and said she had played beautifully. Another placed a hand over their chest and said the music had reached them in a way they did not expect. She nodded quietly, unsure how to respond. Words felt small compared to what she had just felt. As she walked out from backstage, the crowd was still buzzing. Conversations overlapped, filled with surprise and excitement. She noticed heads turning toward her. Some people whispered her way, but this time it felt different. There was no laughter in their voices now. A few students who had once mocked her avoided her eyes. Others looked at her with a strange mix of admiration and embarrassment. One student, usually loud and confident, approached her slowly and said they did not know she could play like that. The words sounded simple, but the tone carried regret. She listened quietly, offering small nods. She was not angry. She felt something closer to relief. The weight she had carried for so long had shifted. People had seen her, truly seen her, even if just for a few minutes. When the event ended, the hall slowly emptied. The chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed. She gathered her things and walked outside. The air felt cool against her skin. For the first time in days, she took a deep breath that did not feel forced. The walk home felt different. Her steps were lighter. The streets looked the same, but she felt changed inside. She replayed the performance in her mind, not focusing on mistakes, but on the feeling of letting the music speak. At home, the house greeted her with its usual quiet. She placed her bag down and sat at the piano. For a moment, she did nothing. She just rested her hands on the keys. Feeling their familiar shape, she began to play again, softly. This time, there was no fear chasing the notes. The music flowed freely, calm and warm. She realized she was smiling. The next day at school, things were not the same. She noticed it as soon as she walked into the building. People greeted her in the hallway. Some smiled shyly, others spoke with excitement. She still kept her head down, but inside, she felt steadier. Teachers spoke to her with new respect. One mentioned opportunities, clubs, and future events. She listened carefully, though she did not promise anything. She was not ready to rush into the spotlight. She needed time to understand what this moment meant for her. In class, students treated her differently. A few apologized quietly for past jokes. Others asked questions about how long she had been playing. She answered softly, choosing her words carefully. She did not boast. That was never who she was. Despite the attention, she remained the same person at heart. She still preferred quiet corners and moments alone. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt invisible. There were moments when the attention felt overwhelming. She would retreat into herself, wishing for the calm she once had. But then she remembered the silence after her final note, the way the room had frozen. That memory gave her strength. One afternoon, she found herself back in the music room after school. The piano waited, just as it always had. She sat down and played, letting the room fill with sound. This time, the door was open. A few people passed by and paused to listen. No one interrupted. No one laughed. They simply listened. She did not stop playing. Later that week, she was asked if she wanted to perform again, this time by choice. The question did not make her panic like before. It still scared her, but it did not feel impossible. She asked for time to think, and the answer was respected. At home, she spoke more than usual. She shared pieces of her experience, not every detail, but enough. The piano remained her closest companion, but now it felt like a bridge instead of a hiding place. Some nights, doubt still crept in. She wondered if that performance had been a one-time moment. She wondered if people expected too much now. When those thoughts came, she played. The music reminded her that it was never about proving anything. As days turned into weeks, the shock of the performance slowly settled into something quieter. People moved on to new topics, new events, but something lasting remained. She had changed how others saw her, and more importantly, how she saw herself. She understood now that being shy did not mean being weak. Silence did not mean emptiness. She had carried something powerful inside her all along. One evening, as she finished playing and let the last note fade, she sat still for a long moment. Her reflection stared back at her from the piano surface. She did not look like a different person, but she felt stronger. The world had not suddenly become easy. Fear still existed, but it no longer controlled her. And as she closed the piano gently, she knew this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of learning how to live with her gift, on her own terms. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm after the event. The days were no longer filled with whispers or constant questions. The excitement faded, as excitement always does, but something deeper stayed behind. She felt it in the way she walked, in the way she breathed, and in the quiet confidence growing inside her. She returned to her usual routines. She still chose seats near windows and preferred silence over noise. She still listened more than she spoke, but now, when she looked down at her notebook, it was not from fear, it was from choice. That small difference meant everything. Music continued to be her safe place, but it no longer felt like a secret she had to protect. She played at home most evenings, sometimes softly, sometimes with strength. The piano did not judge her. It never had. But now, it felt like it understood her better than ever. At school, she joined the music room more often. Sometimes she played alone. Other times, a few people sat quietly nearby, listening. She did not announce herself. She did not perform for praise. She played because it felt right. One afternoon, a younger student stood by the door, watching her play. When she finished, the student asked how she learned. She smiled gently and said she learned by listening and by not giving up. It was the longest sentence she had spoken all day, and it felt good. She began to understand that her talent was not meant to shock people. It was meant to speak for her when words failed. It was meant to remind others that quiet people often carry loud stories inside them. There were still hard days. Some mornings, fear returned without warning. On those days, she felt the old urge to hide. But she had learned something important. Fear did not mean she had to stop. It only meant she had to move more gently. Opportunities came her way, but she chose carefully. She said no when she needed to. She said yes when she felt ready. Each decision belonged to her, and that control helped her grow. At home, the piano remained in its place, worn and familiar. She often thought about how many hours she had spent alone with it, how many feelings she had poured into those keys when no one was watching. Those moments had shaped her more than any applause ever could. Sometimes, late at night, she played the same piece she had performed on stage. It sounded different now. Not better or worse, just different. It carried less fear and more peace. She noticed changes in the way people treated one another too. Some students became kinder, more thoughtful. The memory of her performance lingered as a quiet lesson. Not everyone learned from it, but some did, and that was enough. As time passed, she realized the biggest change was not in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She no longer felt small. She no longer believed she had nothing to offer. One day, while walking past the stage where everything had happened, she stopped for a moment. The lights were off. The room was empty. It looked ordinary now. She smiled softly and continued walking. She understood then that the moment itself was never the point. The courage it took to face it was what mattered. Her life did not turn into something loud or dramatic. There were no sudden dreams of fame or bright stages. Instead, there was something better. There was balance. There was honesty. She kept playing. She kept growing. She kept listening to herself. And when people looked at her now, they no longer saw just a shy girl in the corner. They saw someone with depth, patience, and quiet strength. She knew there would always be moments when she felt unsure, but she also knew she could sit at the piano, place her fingers on the keys, and let the music guide her again. The girl who once tried to disappear had learned how to stand, not loudly, not boldly, but truthfully, and that made all the difference.